Hello, I'm David from Barclays.
He's lying.
I'm currently in the process of upgrading your account.
No, he isn't.
So I just need your full password.
No, he doesn't. He's a scam.
Once I've got that, I can send you a link to access the account.
That's also a scam. Every year, millions are lost to fraud. At Barclays, we'll never ask for your full password or PIN, so never give it out.
Thanks for your time.
At least that's true.
Mid-morning with Mike Graham. Talk Radio.
And now it is Monday, and it is a bank holiday Monday, but that doesn't stop Peter Hitchens from talking to us. Peter, very good morning to you.
Morning.
What would you say Mayday is all about? Because I've been asking that question this morning. I've yet to find a suitable answer.
Well, it did used to be the International Festival of Labour.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the reasons why Michael Foot, when he was Employment Secretary, brought it in.
Yeah.
In the Labour government of the early 1970s. But it was never a particularly big deal in this country. What we also had was ridiculous maypole ceremonies and people skipping ropes around. That also seems to me to have been largely obsolete by then. It's a weird business. The whole thing about bank holidays, now that people have a statutory lengthy paid holidays every year, is a bit archaic in my view. And I've never much enjoyed them because they always happen on Mondays and turn out to be an extended Sunday, but without the laughs.
Yes, exactly right.
I really don't get it. So here I am speaking to you today from the offices of the Mail on Sunday, as I would on any...
Yes, well, this is the same for me. I mean, people always ask me, will you be working on Bank Holiday Monday? And I always go, well, of course I will. You know, why wouldn't I? But the thing is, it's funny, because I used to work in Scotland, and up there they still celebrate something called Glasgow Fair, which was basically intended as a week off for the people that worked in the shipyards and the factories and all of that, where they'd all sort of toodle off down to Blackpool for the week. But they still have it. And it seems to me to be, as you say, very archaic, really. Well,
it is. It predates the introduction of paid holidays on a large scale, and no one's ever going to take it away, because once you've given a concession of a day off, it's very, very hard to take it away. So we're stuck with it. The only public holiday I've ever enjoyed is when I was living in the USA was Thanksgiving, which falls on a Thursday, and therefore has a wholly different atmosphere from a Monday bank holiday. And I thought it was rather fun. I always thought we should institute one of our own.
Yes.
Round about Winston Churchill's birthday, but preferably on the nearest Thursday to it. That I would like, but Mondays off, they just leave me cold, I'm afraid.
No, I know what you mean. Although, sadly, the Thanksgiving holiday has also brought us the dreaded Black Friday, which we've now appropriated, which means that everybody rushes out and sort of clambers over one another to buy plates for half price.
Why is it Black Friday? I mean, Black Friday used to refer to days on which terrible things
happen. I know.
Why is it black? I don't understand it.
I think that comes from the American actual signalling of something which is on sale, which literally had a sort of a black label put on it if it was on sale, and I think that's what it comes from.
Well, it sounds very odd to me, but we do seem to adopt without thought an awful lot of American expression.
Yes. Well, I'll tell you one thing I wish we would adopt, because I was talking to my sister in Connecticut last night, is their attitude on masks, which have now been more or less done away with. The mask mandate, as it's called in America, has been done away with in almost every state. So therefore, they say quite reasonably, if you want to wear one, go ahead. But if you don't want to wear one, that's also fine.
Well, it would be good, wouldn't it? But of course, the whole argument about masks has never been held on a rational level.
No.
It's always been an emotional thing, and any attempt to actually bring in reason and fact into the discussion is met with cries of rage. It's still the most amazing fact that the only serious randomized controlled trial of the effectiveness of mask wearing ever undertaken in Denmark earlier on this year, the results of it have not appeared in most British newspapers, exception of my own, nor have they appeared on the BBC. Nobody knows what it is, and when it is referred to obliquely, various things about it are claimed, which in my view are, how should I put this politely, questionable. Because at the moment people start thinking about this, and the whole British government attitude to it, which I quoted lengthily at the time, was that there really isn't much evidence for the usefulness of these things, but it's an emotional thing, and it's also a measure of control. If you can get millions of people to go around wearing bits of cloth over their faces, almost cancelling their own identity, and promote the level of fear which makes this appear sensible, then you've got an extraordinarily high control over the society which you govern, and one which is I would once have thought people in this country would reject, but it continues. And I think even if an attempt is made to stop it, and say, for instance, they reopen the cinemas, and they say, well, actually, you don't need to wear a mask in the cinema. If you go to the cinema, particularly for a film that's got a lot of people watching it, without a mask, I think you'd probably find that other members of the audience will turn on you and say, why aren't you wearing a mask? It might possibly urge you to leave the auditorium. I really do think that this has now taken root in our society and it will be very, very hard to get rid of.
Yes, it's an interesting point, because one of the things that nobody really ever questions, and I have questioned in the past, is that if mask wearing prevents the spread of COVID, how come January happened? Because we were wearing masks in January, we were wearing masks in December. You know, they brought mask wearing in as a compulsory thing, I think, back in the sort of late summer. And so clearly the wearing of masks either doesn't work in stopping the spread of COVID, or the spread of COVID was happening in places where people were not wearing masks. But what we know...
You're doing it again, you're applying reason to dogma. The answer to that, of course, if we hadn't been wearing masks, it would have been even worse.
Oh, of course, yes. There we are.
There is an answer to everything in dogma. You're never wrong. And so, however sensible the arguments you come up with, and you think, well, this will really fox them. They really won't have it. They always do have an answer because it's a completely circular system.
Yes,
and everything comes back to the same thing. This was the lockdown was right and justified. Mask wearing was correct. The whole spread of fear and panic was a good thing, and we would have been much worse off without it. And that's the end of it. And if an inquiry ever is held, I'm terribly sorry to inform you that is the outcome that will follow. It's as if the Iraq War had happened, and the inquiry after it said it was a triumph. That is the nature of the manipulation of public opinion.
It's actually an interesting point you make there, because I'd forgotten actually that one of the things that Tony Blair always said was, well, what would have happened if we hadn't gone in?
Yes.
And you go, well, I don't know. What do you think would have happened?
Well, he, of course, was of the opinion that Saddam was a sort of Hitler figure and had to be defeated, otherwise he would have taken over the world with his marching legions. I exaggerate slightly, but fundamentally the portrayal of foreign leaders of despotic countries as new Hitlers or new Mussolinis or whatever it happens to be is what they always do. And if you object to this, then you're told that you're an appeaser and that you're a defeatist and that you're exposing the country to danger. In the last occasion on which this fell apart was Iraq, which I think still most people do understand was a serious mistake. But subsequent catastrophes of the same kind, notably the Libyan one, the culprit of that, David Cameron, still lives completely untouched. People are much more worried about his activities with Greensill than they are about the fact that he and President Sarkozy engaged in this mad adventure, which did limitless damage both to Libya and the rest of the world. Right. And it's never even examined. And sooner or later, I think it will probably come about with the kind of people we now have running so much of our media and our universities, that the Iraq War will quietly turn out to be a success as well.
Yes, and of course, both of those incidents, both Iraq and Libya, we're still feeling the effects from. You know, the reverberations of the people leaving those countries to come here on dinghies, eventually from Calais, is still happening.
Oh yes, and it will go on for many, many years to come. The whole crisis in Europe, remember when huge numbers of people were literally walking in enormous crowds across the continent.
Yes.
That was the result both of our Libyan and our Syrian adventures. And it's unstoppable now. The Mediterranean, it's now clear to people in sub-Saharan Africa that if they can get to the Mediterranean and pay people smugglers enough, they can get across. And also people coming from the Middle East, once they can get past Turkey, they can get into Europe. It's completely changed the demography and politics of the European continent, and I suspect it's irreversible. And we have our own small branch of it, which is the discovery by many people that it's really extraordinarily easy to get across the English Channel.
Yes,
which it is, and that is now we simply do not have because it used to be a strong psychological protection. People used to think it was more or less uncrossable, except on especially calm days. Now that psychological barrier is gone, people realise they can cross it, and we have a border almost as porous as those of our continental neighbours.
Yes, and I was reading, I think yesterday, that 2,000 people thus far this year alone have come on that by that method, and all of them are here. They haven't been sent back, they haven't been detained in any way, and in fact, quite the reverse. They're helped out of the dinghies and brought on shore. I mean, and whatever the rights and wrongs of it may be, and whatever desperation these people may suffer, it's not right.
Well, I noticed they're also immediately presented with personal face masks by the authorities.
Well, quite. We have
no mechanism that can actually return people to their countries of origin.
No,
and people are aware of this, and the people smugglers take full advantage of it.
Yeah, and people say to me all the time, "Why do you not cover it?" And I said, "Well, we do cover it from time to time, but eventually you can't just keep saying the same thing, which is basically that Priti Patel has promised to make a difference to the way this works, but she's incapable of doing that and isn't going to do anything about it really. So the fact that she keeps saying she's going to is literally of no consequence. And we've now got to a point, rather like we have with Boris Johnson, where I'm not sure people believe anything that they say."
Well, I think there was certainly a strong tendency in the Cameron years for the government to make promises about reducing levels of migration to this country, which it must have known it couldn't keep. I think that there's been some rhetoric from Priti Patel, but I think the current government knows perfectly well that it's offering a hostage to fortune. So the kind of thing David Cameron used to say. I think they've more or less grasped that it's something they have no real control over.
Mm. No, I think that's right. And you said this weekend in your column that you didn't really care about the story regarding Boris Johnson's soft furnishings, crude and rather vulgar as they are. And I understand your point. My point about it has been that, yes, it's a ridiculously trivial story and it shouldn't be important, but he himself has made it important by concealing information that we are entitled to have, surely.
Well, I suppose so, but newspapers and broadcasting organisations fill up with stuff which is unimportant, while they ignore stuff which is important. I'll give you a couple of examples this past week. One of them is the extraordinary report into the jaunty bravery, the young man who threw a child from the top of the Tate Modern. I recommend anybody to read this report, which you can get on the internet, Serious Case Review, because it's an extraordinary story of this person doing so many terrible things over and over and over again, yet ending up at liberty to go out and do this. Imagine being the family afflicted by the action which he undertook. Why is such a person at liberty in the first place?
Right.
There's no serious addressing. There ought, in my view, to be a national debate about this. Also, what was wrong with him? Why was he in this state? Now, the report refers to medication which he was taking. Now, I'm not drawing any conclusions here. I'm merely making a statement. But there have been many cases in the United States of horrible events where the person involved in mass shootings and similar things, where the person involved has turned out to have been taking legal psychotropic medications. And as a result, there's a growing feeling, there's a correlation between the two. And there are doctors such as the interesting Dr. Peter Breggin, who argue that something needs to be done to see whether there is some connection between what people have been taking and what they've done. When I inquired what was the medication, I went to the proper people to do this. What was the medication which Bravery was taking? No one would tell me. I was patient confidentiality. I said, surely, if you chuck, and this person has been convicted of this, no argument, but if you chuck a child over the top of a high building with likelihood that that child will die and with the certainty that will be seriously injured, it seems to me you forfeit medical confidentiality.
Well, you would think so.
But things become more important, but no, absolutely flat. No, we're not telling you. We're not saying. And also, I always ask, because actually individual insanity is quite rare. Madness of crowds is quite common, but one has to ask, what was the reason? And there are many, many cases, and there's a very interesting website which I refer people to called cannabis. Sorry, I can't remember the attacker smoked cannabis.
Okay.
Which has been compiled by an acquaintance of mine, and which goes into the hundreds, possibly thousands of criminal cases reported only in local newspapers now, of people who've committed attack or smoke cannabis, of people who've committed serious violent crimes and are users of cannabis. Now, this may be a completely irrelevant connection or a correlation or significance, but it seems to me that it's one that needs to be investigated. I can't find out in many cases, when I ask the police and the authorities, whether people who've engaged in completely irrational acts of serious violence have actually been either taking cannabis or have been taking powerful psychotropic medicines. It's something this country will not discuss. That's much more important, it seems to me.
Yes.
Than whether someone called Lulu has put silly wallpaper.
Yeah, but is this the
these show business soap opera types of political coverage take up so much time and waste so much time? And here's a simple point: I have no sympathy with most politicians. They're mostly useless, and anybody who's listened to me or read what I say here knows that I have no sympathy with Johnson at all. I think he's a terrible prime minister, and I don't want to make out his case. But really and truly, it's the prime minister of this country. It might one day be a decent person with a young family, and the security people will say to him or her, "You can't live at home anymore. You've got to move yourself and your young family into this flat, because we can't protect you outside it." I think it's not unreasonable to suggest that the people who are compelled to live in this strange place at least have some control over what it's like, and it's reasonably pleasant and comfortable. I think the public purse can afford that kind of thing, and it really isn't a big political issue. It shouldn't be an issue between parties. It shouldn't dominate newspapers or an election campaign. If you want to worry about it, fine, but it just isn't as important. Anything like as important as the issue we were discussing earlier of uncontrolled illegal immigration run by people smugglers, or the problems of people on our streets who are capable of terrible acts of violence about whom nothing is being done. These are huge. And also, frankly, if it's housing you're worried about, what about housing benefit? It costs as much as the Royal Air Force every year.
Yeah. And all it really does is it enrich a lot of private landlords who get paid by the government to house people at rather expensive rates.
It's a disastrous attempt to cope with the needs of people for housing, and it raises the question: did we make, as I believe we did, a terrible mistake by getting rid of council housing? I
think we did. I don't think there's anyone in this country that doesn't agree with you on that, because clearly to sell off council housing was okay as an idea, but only if you replaced it with a similar amount of housing for people who required it, which obviously they haven't done.
Well, which we didn't. And also you launched into the economy a huge amount of money chasing housing, which was one of the reasons why the price of houses has been subject to a far higher level of inflation than practically anything else. It was much praised, little discussed, and in my view, a mistake. Far more important than the wallpaper and the sofas in Downing Street. Yet very, very seldom. When I worked down the House of Commons back in the 1980s, I suddenly realised after a couple of years of this, I had almost no idea what Parliament had been doing all this time. We'd been engaged so much in political gossip, who's up, who's down, who's in, who's out, leak this, leak that we'd forgotten to notice what was actually being done by the government. Sometimes I come across acts of Parliament which went through while I was working there. I didn't even know about them. But I think you're right. I think the political coverage is all skewed in the wrong way.
Yeah, I think that's true. But perhaps it's the reason for that is because what the government's been rather good at, not least by introducing the Freedom of Information Act, which is working in the completely opposite direction of freedom of information, is that when you try and get answers, as you have on the John C. Bravery story, you get no answer. Therefore, there's no story, and therefore they've kept that part of the of the world secret, really.
But it's not quite true. Even without the answer, there's a story. I mean, this was in the Daily Mail last week about the Bravery case.
Yeah,
you see it, but why is no one to blame?
Yeah,
there's a full page full of absolutely incredible. You just read it as if your jaw just drops over and over again.
Yeah,
why is this happening? But page 15. It's a good show in a powerful newspaper. But I don't recall hearing much about it anywhere else. It's a national scandal. It's our scale of importance that I can't work out.
Yeah.
People accuse me of sucking up to Johnson because of what I said. It's absolute rubbish.
Right.
I continue to criticise him politically as much as I possibly can, but I just think both the media and the public should really try much harder to hold the government to account on the things which really matter.
Yeah.
And this wallpaper stuff just isn't it.
Well, the thing is, I would differ slightly with you on that. I mean, there are lots of people who tell me every single time I talk about it, it's rubbish, you shouldn't be talking about it, it's not a story. The reason I think it's a story is not so much because of what he spent, not so much of the fact that he did have £60,000 of our money to spend, but apparently that wasn't enough, so they had to borrow some more to make sure that they could get a £6,000 lamp, which looks pretty hideous to me, but that seems to be what they want. The fact remains to me that, you know, if he thinks that he doesn't have to tell us who gave him the money, if he's that arrogant, and it could end up being somebody who shouldn't have given him the money, albeit that he's now paid it back, he's making it a story by refusing to say, and I think he doesn't have that right, and I think that's what's interesting about it.
All that is true, but again, it's scale. And here's the thing: if you look into the finances of one Winston Spencer Churchill, active in politics, in the
who was also continually broke, I understand,
and he was constantly broken and accepting all kinds of help from donors who I think most of us would regard now as pretty dodgy. How much does this matter? If he'd been destroyed, if Winston Churchill had been destroyed by such a scandal in, say, 1926, and had been biffed out of politics and never seen again, who else would have been there in 1940 to say, no, we mustn't make peace with Hitler? Is this really our scale of values?
Yeah.
Do we really mean it? Is it the thing we should be pursuing? Is it the quality? Johnson is not Churchill. He may think he is. He's absolutely not. But is this the right way of pursuing the coverage of politics? Does it really illuminate? And I've done an awful lot of scandal, and I look back on a lot of it, I think, what was I doing there? Pursuing David Blunkett over this and Peter Mandelson over that. Why did I do that? What good did it do? And so much of my time in Washington was spent on Bill Clinton's ridiculous sexual scandals.
Yes.
Well, they were ridiculous, and a lot of what he did was extremely unpleasant, but it wasn't the point. The point about his government was much more that he was pretty much handing the country over to China.
Yes.
And hardly anybody noticed that at the time.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's enough to make a conspiracy theorist blush. But there we are. Listen, I'm afraid we're out of time, Peter. Fascinating, though. We should pick this up again next week because there's much to be said about it. And I wonder if even by then, the people pursuing Boris Johnson will still be pursuing him over the same stuff because he can't go on forever. Peter Hitchens, Man on Sunday columnist there, back with us next Monday, of course, which won't be a bank holiday, but it'll make no difference to us. This is Talk Radio.
Online